A US versus Iran war is transforming rapidly from a possibility to a probability, with all signs now suggesting that the American military is close to joining the fight. The only question left is, when will the US make its entry? But one thing seems certain, the countdown has well and truly begun. For a long time, there was much doubt around whether or not the US would take an active role in this fight, with American President Donald Trump pushing for a peaceful resolution between Iran and Israel since taking office earlier this year. The president has made repeated attempts to strike a deal with Iran, urging the country to end its nuclear program before it's too late. A mere month ago, he spoke hopefully of peace and prosperity across the Middle East, stating,
"For the first time in 1,000 years, the world will look at this region not as a place of turmoil and strife and war and death, but as a land of opportunity and hope."
Trump even urged Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to attack Iran and give him more time to negotiate. But Israel clearly had other plans in mind. On June 13, it launched Operation Rising Lion, striking targets in Tehran and other locations across Iran, beginning an ongoing and rapidly escalating conflict between the two nations. In the wake of the Israeli attack, the US was quick to call the decision a unilateral one in a statement from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, which read, "Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We're not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region." However, in that very same statement, Rubio also suggested that the US will not shy away from taking action if Iran dared target US people or interests. He wrote, "President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear, Iran should not target US interests or personnel." Things often change quickly in times of war, and only a few days since the first strikes were fired, the US position appears to have shifted away from focusing on peaceful talks and negotiations towards full-scale military conflict. And there are now several clear signs that the country is ready to enter the fray. Arguably, the biggest and clearest of those signs is the movement of multiple US forces and some serious military hardware into the region. On Monday, June 16, confirmed reports reveal that the US Navy is sending its super carrier, USS Nimitz, as well as its accompanying strike group to the Middle East. The lead ship of the Nimitz class, USS Nimitz, is one of the biggest warships in the world, as well as the oldest serving aircraft carrier on the planet. It measures up at more than 1,000 feet and is capable of carrying up to 90 fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters in total. It's also fitted with multiple armaments of its own, including 2 anti-aircraft and anti-missile Sea Sparrow weapon systems, a pair of RIM 116 rolling airframe missile ram systems, 2 Phalanx CIWS Gatling guns, 4 Mk38 25mm autocannon turrets, and 10 .50 caliber turret emplacements. This powerful nuclear-powered supercarrier forms the focal point of the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. According to the most recent data, this strike group includes no less than 4 guided missile destroyer vessels, and it's common to have at least 1 fast attack submarine accompanying Navy carriers of this kind too. Meanwhile, riding on board the carrier itself, there's the Carrier Air Wing 17, which also forms part of the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. This air wing is made up of multiple squadrons of FA-18F Super Hornet fighter jets, which are some of the fastest and strongest in the world, and Sikorsky MH-60S Seahawk helicopters. There's also a squadron of EA-18G Growlers, which are electronic warfare aircraft capable of disrupting enemy communications and surveillance systems, along with Northrop Grumman E-2 Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft, used to detect the likes of enemy missile strikes, ships, vehicles, and aircraft on approach. In short, the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group is a force to be reckoned with more than enough firepower on board and in the water to deal some serious damage. According to reports, plans had been in place for quite a while to deploy the Nimitz to the Middle East ahead of its retirement in April 2026. However, those plans have been brought forward, with the Nimitz making the journey several months ahead of schedule, according to Jennifer Griffin, chief national security correspondent for Fox News, who wrote on X, The US Nimitz aircraft carrier strike group is on its way to the Middle East from the South China Sea, a US official tells Fox News. The Nimitz was previously scheduled to replace the USS Carl Vinson carrier strike group, which has been deployed for several months, but is now heading to the Middle East ahead of schedule. 2 super carriers and their strike groups in the same region. That's a rare sight, and one that should send ripples of fear across Iran. It's also a sign, in the eyes of many military experts, of impending US military action in the region. Just like the Nimitz, the USS Carl Vinson brings guided missile destroyers as part of its strike group, as well as powerful fighter jets, attack helicopters, electronic warfare systems, surveillance craft and more. Strike groups like these are immensely versatile, capable of providing both offensive and defensive support as needed. The air wings of the Nimitz and Carl Vinson groups, for example, could be tasked with intercepting aerial threats or obtaining aerial superiority in contested airspace, or to launch precise missile strikes on ground or sea-based targets. The surveillance and airborne early warning craft, meanwhile, could help both US and Israeli forces preempt any Iranian missile or drone strikes and take protective measures. In other words, the mere presence of these carriers in the area could help to neutralize a large part of Iran's offensive capabilities, putting the country at a serious disadvantage while strengthening Israel's position. And there's more bad news for Iran, because the USS Nimitz is not the only piece of US military hardware on its way to the area. Late on Sunday night, a large formation of American aerial refueling aircraft, including more than 30 KC-135 Strato tankers and KC-46 Pegasus tankers, were spotted heading east. The tankers took off from various locations around the US and in other parts of the world, with many traveling across the Atlantic Ocean to take up new positions in various locations around Europe and elsewhere. Various flight tracking accounts on X charted the progress of the tankers, with one counting at least 32 in total. They wrote, "With the addition of 4 tankers out of New Jersey, there are now at least 32 tankers observed in the overnight group. A considerable portion went to Moron Air Base in Spain, with others on to UK, Germany, Italy, and one to Estonia. A few pressed on to CENTCOM AOR. Tankers like these do reposition from time to time or carry out training and ferrying operations as needed, but it's extremely unusual to see so many of them travelling at the same time and in the same direction like this." Indeed, various online military analysts and reporters could find no links between these movements and any scheduled air exercises, with many concluding that could only be a sign of strategic repositioning, possibly in preparation or expectation of upcoming military action. Tankers like these are vital in sustaining and empowering mobile strike platforms, and both the KC-135 and KC-46 rank among the most efficient and effective craft in their category, capable of delivering tens of thousands of pounds of fuel to the likes of fighters, bombers, surveillance aircraft, and even other tankers as needed. They allow aircraft to continuously operate far from home base and deep behind enemy lines, without having to retreat and travel huge distances to land, refuel, and take off again. They also make it much easier for jets and bombers to carry large payloads, without having to worry about fuel efficiency or range, since there's always a huge stock of fuel ready and waiting on the tankers. This is invaluable when it comes to conducting extensive and impactful military maneuvers far from home. It makes it much easier for aerial forces to maintain pressure on their targets and dominate the skies uninterrupted. Recent days have also seen destroyers like the USS Thomas Hudner, USS Arleigh Burke, and the USS The Sullivans making their way to the eastern Mediterranean Sea. According to reports, the Arleigh Burke and the Sullivans have already assisted in defending Israel by launching missile interceptors. The US has also provided land support to Israel, possibly in the form of Patriot surface-to-air missile batteries or Terminal High Altitude Area Defense THAAD systems. Plus, just over a week ago, on June 9, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed that the US had rerouted around 20,000 anti-drone missiles, which were originally due to go to Ukraine to the Middle East. It's highly likely that these have or will be used to help defend Israel from Iranian missile strikes. While detailed reports and official statements are sparse at the moment, the evidence is plain to see. The US is making all the necessary moves to not merely support Israel, but prepare for military action of its own in Iran. A recent State Department statement, released on June 16, reinforces this theory. It warns all US citizens against travel to Iran, instructing those that are already there to either leave now or get ready to take shelter. US citizens should not travel to Iran for any reason, and should depart Iran immediately if they are there. US citizens who are unable to depart Iran should be prepared to shelter in place for extended periods. US citizens in Iran face serious increasing dangers due to rising regional tensions. The US government does not have diplomatic or consular relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Not long after that statement was issued, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared a statement of his own on X. Over the weekend, I directed the deployment of additional capabilities to the United States Central Command Area of Responsibility. Protecting US forces is our top priority, and these deployments are intended to enhance our defensive posture in the region. And perhaps the most worrying warning of all came from the most powerful man on the planet, President Trump. The president had been attending a G7 summit, but chose to leave earlier than scheduled. French President Emmanuel Macron claimed that Trump had departed to get to work on a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, but Trump quickly disputed that claim. On his social media platform, Truth Social, the president posted, "Publicity-seeking President Emmanuel Macron of France mistakenly said that I left the G7 summit in Canada to go back to DC to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Wrong. He has no idea why I'm now on my way to Washington, but it certainly has nothing to do with a ceasefire. Much bigger than that. Whether purposely or not, Emmanuel always gets it wrong. Stay tuned." Trump also posted a stark warning to Iranians, also on Truth Social. "Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran." It doesn't get any clearer than that. The US president, in no uncertain terms, is telling the almost 10 million people living in Iran's capital that they need to flee the area right away. There are only two probable explanations. Either the US has intelligence of an upcoming Israeli strike on Tehran with a real risk of civilian casualties, or the US itself is planning an attack on the city. The Israeli military echoed Trump's claims, issuing an urgent warning of its own for the people of Tehran. On X, an Israel Defense Forces spokesperson wrote, "In the coming hours, the IDF will operate in the area, as it has in recent days throughout Tehran, to strike military infrastructure of the Iranian regime. Your presence in this area endangers your life." Even now, as the missile strikes continue back and forth between Israel and Iran, there may still be time for a rapid resolution to the conflict. Tehran has asked Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Oman to press US President Donald Trump to use his influence on Israel to agree to an immediate ceasefire with Iran in return for Iranian flexibility in nuclear negotiations, according to 2 Iranian and 3 regional sources. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also put the ball in Trump's court, urging the American president to make the correct next steps. In a June 16 X post, he wrote, "If President Trump is genuine about diplomacy and interested in stopping this war, next steps are consequential. Israel must halt its aggression, and absent a total cessation of military aggression against us, our responses will continue. It takes one phone call from Washington to muzzle someone like Netanyahu. That may pave the way for a return to diplomacy." In the same post on X, Araghchi also issued a warning against the US taking an active role in the conflict, stating, "Conversely, getting the US mired in the mother of forever wars will destroy any prospect of a negotiated solution, with dangerous, unpredictable, and likely unfathomable consequences for regional security and the global economy. Let us not forget, Iran did not begin this war and has no interest in perpetuating bloodshed. But we will proudly fight to the last drop of blood to protect our land, our people, our dignity, and our achievements." The war is at a turning point, and the US has a huge part to play in how it unfolds over the coming days and weeks. It appears, based on the signs outlined throughout the video, that the decision has been made. The US will likely assume an active role in the conflict, using its strategically repositioned assets, including tankers, jets, destroyers, and supercarriers, to support Israel and perhaps put an end to its nuclear program by force. But why now? And why should the US get involved rather than leaving Israel to fight its own fight? Well, without official statements and declarations one way or another, there's only room for speculation. But there are several clear and obvious reasons why the US, and President Trump in particular, might decide to go to war with Iran. First, and perhaps most obviously, is the fact that the multiple rounds of talks so far have proven unsuccessful. Trump himself recently admitted that an agreement was less and less of a likely prospect. On June 11, in an interview with the Pod Force One podcast, he was asked if he thought he could convince Iran to end its nuclear program, replying,
I'm getting more and more less confident about it. They seem to be delaying, and I think that's a shame, but I'm less confident now than I would have been a couple of months ago. Something happened to them, but I am much less confident of a deal being made.
But Trump has been adamant right from the start that Iran cannot and will not have a nuclear weapon. And so, if talks aren't enough to make that happen, the only other viable option left is military action. Israel has already started that ball rolling. However, even though Israel has a strong military force, ranked 15th strongest in the world on the Global Firepower Index, one spot ahead of Iran, it doesn't have the necessary firepower to completely wipe out the Iranian nuclear program. This is because Iran has cleverly constructed many of its most important nuclear facilities deep underground, with some being several hundred feet down and others up to half a mile below the surface. The vast majority of bombs dropped from above simply aren't powerful enough to reach targets that far down. They can deal plenty of damage to surface targets or those short distances underground, but are unlikely to make even a dent on the most heavily fortified subterranean Iranian bases. The US, however, has one weapon that could, at least in theory, destroy those bases, namely the GBU-57AB MOP, or Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a precision-guided bunker buster bomb that measures more than 20 feet in length and weighs in at a staggering 30,000 pounds. Much larger and more destructive than any bunker buster bombs seen before, the GBU-57 has never been used in real-world warfare, but has been extensively tested. These bombs are so big, they can only be deployed by the largest bombers, like B-2 Spirits, and the US notably moved several Spirits towards the Middle East in April of this year, which were later used for missions in Yemen. No GBU-57 bombs were dropped during those missions, and the US military has an unknown number of these bombs stocked up and ready to deploy when the moment comes. That moment might be now, as if the US and Israel truly want to end Iran's nuclear ambitions, they would have to target those underground facilities, and the GBU-57 would be the only known option to deal any sort of serious damage. The US therefore might have to get involved in the conflict out of necessity, and while Trump has clearly strived for a peaceful end to Iran's nuclear program, he may now feel that his hand has been forced. All that remains is wait and see when, where, and how the US chooses to strike. Now, take a look at our breakdown of a worst-case scenario for the Iran-Israel war, or learn how Israel planned and executed Operation Rising Lion to devastate Iran's nuclear program just days ago. And don't forget to subscribe to our trusted news channel for more detailed reports and informative updates from the war as the situation unfolds.